Ambassador Emma Harrison's jaw clenched as she studied the massive hologram dominating the UN Security Council chamber. King Vraxthal's crystalline form shimmered with an iridescent arrogance that made her trigger finger itch. 15 years as a Navy SEAL had taught her to read opponents, and everything about this alien screamed predator. Your species' attempts at defense are quaint. Vraxthal's voice resonated through the chamber, each word dripping with condescension. His crystalline crown pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that Emma's enhanced eyes couldn't help but analyze. These metal coffins you call ships would not survive 10 seconds against even our smallest vessel. The other diplomats shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Emma remained still. While they saw an overwhelming show of force, she noticed something else. Subtle imperfections in the alien king's supposedly perfect crystalline armor. Microscopic stress patterns that shouldn't exist in a species that claimed to have achieved biological perfection. Perhaps, Emma replied, keeping her voice level, you'd care to demonstrate. Her augmented pupils, a parting gift from her SEAL days, caught the momentary disruption in Vraxthal's bioluminescent patterns. Gotcha, she thought. The alien king's massive form leaned forward, his face filling the holographic space above the council table. You dare challenge the Kraxan Empire, we who have conquered 1,000 worlds. Emma stood, her 5'9" frame somehow filling the room with the same presence as the alien's massive hologram. I dare to suggest that someone who's won every fight for 1,000 years might have forgotten how to actually fight. The chamber erupted in gasps and murmurs. Behind her, Admiral Chen whispered urgently, Ambassador Harrison, please. But Emma had seen something else in the real-time data scrolling across her augmented vision. The Kraxan ships, massive crystalline structures that grew and evolved like living things, had shifted formation when she spoke. Not to attack, to defend. Your arrogance is remarkable, Vraxthal snarled, his armor now pulsing with angry reds and oranges. Your entire military might would not equal a single Kraxan battle group. And yet, Emma smiled, the expression never reaching her eyes. You brought 3 battle groups to this meeting. Curious choice for someone so confident. The alien king's next words caught in his throat as Emma casually brought up a hologram of her own. It showed the Kraxan fleet's formation, with key stress points highlighted. Your ship's crystal matrices show micro-fractures consistent with combat damage, but your empire hasn't fought a war in centuries, which means, she paused, letting the implications sink in. Your perfect evolution has hit a wall, hasn't it? Vraxthal's massive form seemed to grow even larger, his voice booming through the chamber. You think your primitive eyes can read our biotechnology. We are perfect. We are evolution's peak. No, Emma countered, her voice cutting through his bluster like a blade. You're stagnant. Those fractures, they're getting worse with each generation. Your empire's biological engineering can't fix them because you've forgotten how to adapt. Perfection is just another word for stopped growing. The chamber fell silent as the alien king's crystalline form vibrated with barely contained rage. Emma's augmented vision caught the spread of stress patterns across his armor, exactly the reaction she predicted. You dare, he began, but Emma cut him off. I dare because that's what humans do. We're not perfect. We're not even close. But we never stopped growing, never stopped learning, never stopped adapting. She stepped closer to his hologram, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's entire history of overcoming impossible odds. So yes, Your Majesty, I dare. The question is, do you? In the tense silence that followed, Emma's enhanced senses picked up the subtle changes in the Kraxan ship's crystalline structure. They were preparing for something big. But she had expected that too. Sometimes, the best way to avoid a fight was to start one on your own terms. The first move had been made. Now she just had to wait for the king's pride to do exactly what pride always did: overreach. King Vraxthal's hologram flickered as he raised his crystalline hand, and every screen on Earth suddenly activated. Billions of humans found themselves staring at the alien monarch's towering form, his bioluminescent armor pulsing with barely contained fury. People of Earth, his voice boomed across the global network, your ambassador has shown remarkable audacity. In our infinite wisdom, we shall grant you one chance to prove your worth. Emma Harrison kept her face neutral, but her augmented eyes were already analyzing the transmission patterns. The Kraxen weren't just broadcasting, they were scanning, gathering data on Earth's communication infrastructure. Amateur move. The terms are simple. Vraxthal continued, his crown crystals flaring. 3 trials. 3 chances to prove that your species deserves to remain free. The UN chamber erupted in worried murmurs, but Emma stepped forward. And if we refuse? The alien king's laugh shook the holographic projectors. Then our fleet turns your cities to ash. Choose quickly, Ambassador. Your species' survival hangs on your words. Emma allowed herself a small smile. You know, where I come from, we have a saying. If someone forces you to play their game, they're usually afraid of playing yours. The king's crystalline armor rippled with patterns that Emma's combat systems identified as stress reactions. You dare suggest, we fear you. I suggest, Emma said, pulling up a holographic display of her own. That's someone who needs to stack the deck. This obviously isn't as confident as they pretend to be. The display showed a detailed analysis of the Kraxen fleet's defensive formations, data they thought humans couldn't possibly gather. Emma watched with satisfaction as Vraxthal's secondary crystal layers developed microscopic fractures. The first trial will test physical prowess. The king snarled, ignoring her provocation. The second, technological advancement. The third, military might. Interesting choices, Emma replied. All areas where you think your biological superiority gives you an advantage. But here's a counter-proposal. We choose our champions first. The chamber fell silent. Even the other human diplomats stared at her in shock. The alien king's massive form leaned forward, his crystal crown blazing. You would trust your fate to individual champions, against our perfect warriors. Emma's augmented vision highlighted the increasing stress patterns in the king's armor. Absolutely. In fact, I already have them in mind. She gestured, and 3 holograms appeared beside her. The first showed Marcus Thompson, the former circus acrobat turned MMA fighter, his small frame belying his incredible capabilities. The second displayed Dr. Jake Reynolds' latest quantum computing breakthrough. The third was simply a tactical display filled with data that made the alien king's crystals pulse with confusion. A runt, a machine tinkerer, and numbers. Vraxthal's laugh echoed through the chamber. These are your champions? No, Emma said quietly, her voice carrying more weight than the king's booming declarations. These are your worst nightmare, because unlike your perfect warriors, they know what it means to fail, to adapt, to overcome. She stepped through the king's hologram, disrupting it momentarily. We accept your challenge, King Vraxthal. But remember, you asked for this. The alien monarch's form stabilized, his crystal armor now pulsing with deep purples of rage and anticipation. 7 solar cycles to prepare. Then we begin. Try not to disappoint us too quickly, Ambassador. As the hologram faded, Admiral Chen grabbed Emma's arm. Have you lost your mind? We can't. Trust me. Emma's eyes tracked the departing Kraxen ships, her augmented vision noting every weakness, every flaw in their supposedly perfect design. They just made their first mistake. And what's that? Emma's smile would have made a shark proud. They believed their own propaganda. Now, get me a secure line to our champions. It's time to show these perfect beings what real evolution looks like. Marcus Ghost Thompson stood in the center of the crystalline arena, looking impossibly small against the towering architecture of the Kraxen combat chamber. At 5'4", He appeared almost childlike next to the entrance where his opponent would emerge. Emma watched from the observation deck, her augmented vision scanning every corner of the arena. "Still think your little champion can survive this?" King Vraxthal's voice dripped with amusement. "Our warrior, Krasful, has never lost a combat." The arena's massive doors parted, revealing a 9-foot mountain of crystalline armor and rippling alien muscle. Krasful's bioorganic armor pulsed with aggressive reds and golds, his footsteps leaving small craters in the reinforced floor. Marcus rolled his shoulders and grinned. "Hey, big guy. Nice light show you've got going on." The alien warrior's response was a roar that shook the arena's crystal walls. Emma's displays showed the sound reaching 140 decibels, but Marcus didn't flinch. "Begin." The king's command echoed through the chamber. Krasful charged forward with devastating speed, his crystalline fist aimed directly at Marcus's head. The human wasn't there. He'd already moved, sliding between the alien's legs with the fluid grace of his circus days. "Too slow, Christmas tree," Marcus taunted, already halfway up the arena wall. The parkour champion treated the vertical surface like a playground, his enhanced reflexes letting him find microscopic handholds in the crystal structure. "Stand still, insect." The alien warrior slammed his fist into the wall, sending crystalline shards flying. Emma's displays caught something interesting. The impact had created stress fractures in Krasful's own armor. "That's it, Marcus," she whispered. "Make him work for it." Marcus launched himself from the wall, tucking into a tight spin that carried him just beyond the alien's grasp. His feet touched down for a split second before he was moving again, a constant blur of motion. "You know what your problem is," Marcus called out, ducking under another earth-shattering punch. "You've got all that power, but you never learned to dance." The human's next move defied physics. He ran straight at Krasful, but at the last moment, used the alien's own sweeping arm as a springboard. Marcus's enhanced muscles launched him into a perfect arc that ended with his feet driving into the back of the warrior's knee, the one spot where Emma's scans had shown a weakness in the crystalline armor. A crack echoed through the arena. Krasful stumbled, his perfect balance disrupted for the first time in his fighting career. "Impossible," the king's voice thundered. "No human can strike through our bioarmor." Marcus was already moving, never staying still long enough to become a target. "See, that's your other problem. You think because something's never happened, it never will." The next minute was a masterclass in human adaptation. Marcus used every surface, every angle, each move flowing into the next. The alien warrior's regenerative abilities meant nothing if he couldn't land a hit, and his increasing fury only made his movements more predictable. "Stop moving." Krasful's frustration made his armor pulse erratically. "Make me," Marcus replied, landing another precision strike at a stress point Emma had identified. The crystalline armor was splintering now, tiny fractures spreading with each impact. The mighty warrior's regeneration couldn't keep up with the accumulated damage to his armor's structural integrity. Then Marcus made his final move. A complex sequence of flips brought him face to face with the alien warrior. Before Krasful could react, the human had already pushed off, using the alien's own chest plate as a launch pad. The force and angle were perfect, sending spider-web cracks through the weakened crystal armor. Krasful fell to his knees, his once perfect armor crumbling around him. The mighty warrior stared at his own shattered defenses in disbelief. "How?" the alien gasped. "How did you?" Marcus landed lightly beside his fallen opponent. "Because humans don't fight to show off how strong we are. We fight to win." He turned to face the king's observation box. "And we're really, really good at finding ways to win." In the sudden silence, Emma's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. The king's own armor showed stress patterns now, and the first trial wasn't even officially over. "The human victor is acknowledged," Vraxthal finally announced, his voice missing its earlier arrogance. "Prepare for the second trial." Dr. Jake Reynolds whistled as he walked into the Kraxen's technological testing chamber, his beat-up laptop bag slung casually over one shoulder. The aliens had transformed the entire room into a massive computational array, their bioorganic crystals pulsing with calculations even at rest. "Your computing device appears damaged," the Kraxen's chief scientist, Vexthor, observed with disdain. His crystalline form shifted colors in what Emma's sensors registered as amusement. Jake patted his laptop bag affectionately. "Oh, this old thing. Nah, it's just been places, done things. You know how it goes." He paused, then added, "Well, maybe you don't." King Vraxthal's hologram materialized above them. "The challenge is simple. Both sides will attempt to solve an ancient mathematical problem that has puzzled the galaxy's greatest minds. The first toe." "Quick question," Jake interrupted, already unpacking his equipment. "Are we trying to find the answer, or are we trying to understand the question?" The king's form flickered with irritation. "They are one and the same, human." "See, that's where you're wrong." Jake connected his laptop to a small quantum processing unit the size of a coffee maker. "And that's why you've been stuck on this problem. For what, 3 centuries? The alien scientists bristled, their crystalline forms emanating patterns of offense. Emma, watching from her observation post, noted the stress fractures spreading through their supposedly perfect structures. "Our bioorganic quantum computer has the processing power of 1,000 of your primitive machines," Vexthor declared. "We have tested every possible solution." Jake looked up from his setup with a grin. "Every possible solution within your framework of understanding. But did you ever consider that maybe you're asking the wrong questions?" The challenge began. Kraxen's massive computational array hummed to life, crystals pulsing with incredible power as they brute forced their way through calculations. Their holographic displays filled with endless streams of data. Jake, meanwhile, typed casually on his laptop, occasionally sipping from a thermos of coffee. "You know what's cool about human computing?" He asked no one in particular. "We never got it perfect. Had to keep finding workarounds. Shortcuts. Beautiful, elegant little hacks. Your primitive methods cannot compare," Vexthor began. "Done," Jake announced. The chamber fell silent. King Vraxthal's hologram leaned forward. "Impossible. Our systems are still processing." "Yeah, see, that's because you're trying to calculate every possible path through the maze." Jake brought up his own holographic display. "I just asked myself why the maze exists in the first place." The display showed something that made the alien scientists' crystals pulse with confusion. Instead of solving the mathematical problem directly, Jake's system had recontextualized it entirely. "The answer isn't a number," he explained, standing up to walk through his solution. "It's a pattern. A story. Your computers are so perfect, so logical, they can't see the poetry in the math." Emma's augmented vision caught the moment understanding dawned on the alien scientists. Their crystalline forms vibrated with what her systems identified as shock. But the computational power required," Vexthor stammered, "is minimal when you come at it sideways." Jake shrugged. "Humans are really good at that. Finding the back door when the front door is too well guarded. Asking why instead of just how." He turned to face King Vraxthal's hologram. "Your system is perfect at what it does, but that's the problem. It can only do what it knows how to do. Ours," he patted his laptop, "ours dreams." The king's massive form seemed to diminish slightly. The human victory is acknowledged, though we do not fully understand how. That's kind of the point. Jake was already packing up his equipment. Perfect understanding is just another word for limited understanding. Real intelligence isn't about having all the answers. It's about never stopping to ask new questions. As they left the chamber, Emma fell into step beside him. You enjoyed that, didn't you? Are you kidding? Jake's eyes sparkled. Did you see their faces when they realized a primitive human just rewrote their understanding of mathematical theory? Almost feel bad for them. He paused. Almost. Above them, the Kraxen's bioorganic systems continued to pulse, but now with an unmistakable pattern of uncertainty. The perfect empire had just learned that perfection had its limits, and the final trial still awaited. Emma stood in the heart of the hastily assembled war room, surrounded by holographic displays of Kraxen battle formations. The past 1,000 years of their military history floated around her in crystalline patterns that her augmented vision was finally beginning to understand. There, she pointed to a particular formation. Every victory, every conquest, they used the same basic strategies, just scaled up or down based on the opposition. Admiral Chen leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the holograms. And that's a weakness. It's the biggest weakness of all. Jake Reynolds chimed in from his console, where lines of code scrolled rapidly. They've optimized their tactics to perfection, against enemies that fight like they do. Marcus Thompson, still sporting bruises from his victory, performed a handstand on a nearby chair. Like fighting a guy who's only ever fought mirrors. He won't know what to do when the mirror starts moving different. Emma's augmented eyes tracked new data streaming in from Earth's combined intelligence networks. Exactly. Every species they've conquered, they first forced them to fight on Kraxen terms. And we're about to show them why that was their biggest mistake. The room's main display lit up with a new message. Emma's expression hardened. Speaking of mistakes, they're broadcasting again. Kane Vraxthal's hologram materialized, his crystalline form more imposing than ever. Your small victories are meaningless, humans. The final trial will demonstrate true military might. No tricks, no clever solutions. Pure strategic combat. Funny thing about combat, Emma replied, her voice steady. The history of warfare is the history of tricks and clever solutions. The king's crystal crown pulsed with anger. You will face our elite fleet in simulated battle. Your entire species' strategic knowledge against our perfect formations. As the transmission ended, Jake let out a low whistle. Did anyone else notice the microfractures in his secondary crystal layer? They're spreading. They're scared, Marcus observed from his upside-down position. All that talk about perfect formations, they're telling us exactly how they plan to fight. Emma nodded, her augmented vision already running combat scenarios. And that's not even the best part. She gestured, bringing up new data streams. Look what our deep space sensors found. The display showed microscopic imperfections in the Kraxen ship's crystal matrices. Their bioorganic technology is breaking down, she explained. Each generation of ships is slightly weaker than the last. They've hit an evolutionary dead end. Because they stopped adapting, Jake realized. They found a perfect form and stuck with it. While we, Marcus flipped back to his feet, never stopped changing. Emma's next command brought up Earth's combined military response. Forces from every nation had united, sharing technologies and tactics that had been secret just days ago. Chinese stealth systems merged with American drone swarms, Russian electronic warfare suites enhanced by Indian quantum computing. Humanity's greatest strength, she said softly, isn't that we're perfect. It's that we never stop learning from our mistakes. A junior officer burst into the room. Ambassador, we're detecting energy buildups in the Kraxen fleet. They're running combat drills. Emma's smile would have made a wolf proud. No, they're showing off, trying to intimidate us with their perfect formations and synchronized movements. She turned to her team. Time to show them why perfection is overrated. Jake's fingers flew over his console. The simulation parameters just came in. They're actually pretty simple, almost like they're designed for their tactics. Of course they are. Emma's augmented vision was already finding the gaps, the weaknesses, the assumptions in the Kraxan battle plans. They want us to fight them head-on, force against force. Marcus cracked his knuckles. So we don't. We don't, Emma confirmed, her plan already taking shape. We show them something they've never seen in 1,000 years of warfare. Admiral Chen raised an eyebrow. And what's that? Emma's response was simple. Chaos. Beautiful, unpredictable, human chaos. She looked around the room, at the representatives of Earth's combined military might. Let's write some new rules of engagement. The massive simulation chamber hummed with energy as holographic fleets materialized in the space between Emma and King Vraxthal. The Kraxan ships arranged themselves in their signature diamond formation, their crystalline structures gleaming with deadly purpose. Your final chance to submit with dignity. The king's voice boomed through the chamber. Your fleet is outnumbered 3-1. Emma's augmented vision scanned the enemy formation, recording every detail. Interesting opening move. The same one you used against the Centaurians 200 years ago. The king's crystal crown pulsed with surprise. You could not possibly know. We know everything. Emma's fingers danced across her control panel. Every battle, every victory, every perfect formation. And that's why you're going to lose. The simulation began. At first, the human fleet seemed to make every possible mistake. Ships scattered in apparent panic, breaking formation, creating gaps in their defense. The Kraxan forces moved in with mathematical precision. Pathetic, Vraxthal sneered. Your forces are in complete disarray. Emma didn't reply. Her attention was fixed on the tactical display, where Jake's quantum algorithms were already at work. The scattered human ships weren't running. They were seeding space with millions of microscopic drones. The first wave of Kraxan ships hit what they thought was an empty sector. Their perfect crystalline hulls began to vibrate at exactly the frequency Jake had calculated. The same frequency that had shown up in those stress fractures. What? The king's voice faltered. What is this? This, Emma said quietly, is evolution in action. The human fleet's apparent chaos transformed into a dance of death. Each scattered ship became the center of a web, the micro-drones creating feedback loops in the Kraxan's bioorganic systems. Their perfect formation became their perfect trap. Impossible. Vraxthal's hologram flickered as he watched his frontline ships begin to crack. Our formations are flawless. That's the problem. Emma triggered the second phase. They're predictable. Marcus, who had been quiet until now, pointed to a section of the battle. There, just like in the arena. They don't know how to handle something that won't fight by their rules. The human fleet's real strategy emerged. They weren't fighting the Kraxan ships. They were fighting the space between them. Quantum-entangled drones created artificial gravity wells. Electronic warfare suites turned the enemy's crystalline communication networks against them. Your ships are synchronized too perfectly, Jake explained, his hands flying over his console. Each one responds the same way to the same stimulus. So we changed the stimulus. The Kraxan's diamond formation began to fracture. As each ship tried to compensate for the chaos around it, it only added to the disruption. Their perfect coordination became perfect confusion. You're not just losing. Emma's voice cut through the command chamber. You're losing to tactics your perfect empire never imagined possible. The simulation showed the final phase of Earth's strategy. The scattered human ships suddenly converged, but not in any formation the Kraxan had ever seen. Each vessel moved independently, adapting to the changing battlefield in real time. Stop this. The king's voice cracked with static. This is not how battle is conducted. No, Emma agreed. It's not. Not according to your rules. But humans, we write new rules every time we fight. The simulated battle ended not with a dramatic explosion, but with a cascade of system failures throughout the Kraxan fleet. Their perfect ships, unable to adapt to the quantum chaos around them, simply stopped functioning. In the stunned silence that followed, Emma turned to face the king's hologram. "You know the worst part. We didn't even show you everything we can do. This was just one possible strategy." Vraxthal's crystalline form had lost its luster, the once proud alien king now facing something his empire had never encountered in 1,000 years, complete and utter defeat by an inferior species. "The trial is concluded," he finally managed, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. "Humanity has proven." "No," Emma interrupted. "We haven't just proven something. We've taught you something. The question is, are you perfect enough to learn from it?" King Vraxthal's hologram stood motionless in the simulation chamber, his crystalline form dulled to an almost opaque gray. The usual pulsing patterns of his bioorganic armor had slowed to an irregular heartbeat rhythm. Emma's augmented vision detected unprecedented levels of stress fractures throughout his structure. 1,000 years. He finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. 1,000 years of victory, of perfection, of certainty. "And that was your first mistake," Emma replied, her voice firm but not unkind. "Certainty is the enemy of growth." The king's massive form seemed to shrink. "How? How did you know our weaknesses so thoroughly?" Emma gestured, and Jake's console projected a series of images, microscopic scans of the Kraxan's bioorganic technology through the ages. "Your empire's evolution stopped the moment you declared yourselves perfect. Look." The images showed a progressive degradation in the crystalline structures, generation after generation. Tiny flaws multiplying, weaknesses compounding. "We didn't just study your current forces," Jake explained, highlighting key points in the data. "We studied your history." The pattern was clear. Your technology wasn't evolving anymore. It was degrading. Marcus, who had been unusually quiet, performed a single perfect handstand, like a fighter who never changes his style. Eventually, someone's gonna figure out the counter. The king's crown crystals flickered with a new pattern, one Emma's systems had never seen before. "But our form is perfect. Our evolution reached its peak." "There is no peak," Emma interrupted. "That's what you never understood about evolution. It's not about reaching perfection. It's about constant adaptation. The moment you stop adapting, you start dying." She brought up new displays, showing Earth's history. "Look at humanity. We've never been perfect. Every victory came from learning from our failures, every advance born from necessity, every innovation sparked by challenge. Your combat style," Marcus added, "was perfect against someone fighting like you. But humans? We fight like humans, always changing, always adapting. Your computing systems," Jake continued, "were perfect for processing known problems. But humans, we dream up new problems, new solutions, new ways of thinking." The king's hologram flickered, and for a moment, his true form was visible. Older, more fragile than the perfect image he projected. "We thought we had achieved the ultimate form of evolution." "There is no ultimate form," Emma said softly. "Life doesn't work that way. The only constant is change." Suddenly, alarms blared through the chamber. Jake's console lit up with urgent data. Multiple stress fractures detected in the Kraxan fleet. Their ships, they're starting to break apart. The king's form stabilized, but something had changed. The rigid patterns of his crystal armor began to shift, to flow in new ways. You knew from the beginning that our perfect empire was crumbling." "Yes," Emma acknowledged, "but more importantly, we knew why. Your empire hasn't faced a real challenge in centuries. You've been fighting the same battle over and over, winning the same victory, until it became meaningless. And now?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Emma's augmented vision caught the subtle changes in the king's crystalline structure, not breaking, but adapting. Now you have a choice. Cling to your perfect, unchanging form and watch it crumble, or learn to change again, the king finished, his voice carrying a note of something new. Uncertainty, yes, but also possibility. The chamber fell silent as the last combat projections faded away. The perfect empire had been defeated not by superior forces or advanced technology, but by the simple, devastating truth that perfection itself was a dead end. Tell me, Ambassador Harrison. The king's voice had lost its arrogant edge, replaced by something more human. What does it feel like to never stop growing? Emma smiled, a real smile this time. Terrifying, exhilarating, and absolutely worth it. The UN Security Council chamber had never seen anything quite like this. King Vraxthal stood physically present, not as a hologram, his crystalline form catching the morning light in ways that made Emma's augmented vision recalibrate repeatedly. The once rigid patterns of his bioorganic armor now flowed like liquid metal, adapting and changing with each moment. 3 days ago, the king addressed the assembly. I came here convinced of my empire's perfection. I stand before you now knowing the greatest truth of all. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Emma watched from her position at the diplomatic table, noting how the stress fractures in the king's armor had begun to heal in new, unexpected ways. The crystal wasn't just repairing itself, it was evolving. Ambassador Harrison, Vraxthal turned to face her. Your species has taught the Kraxan Empire something we had forgotten over 1,000 years of victory. The joy of learning, of growing, of changing. Jake, sitting with his ever-present laptop, pulled up real-time scans of the Kraxan fleet in orbit. Their ships are already different, he whispered to Marcus. The crystal structures are adapting. Your victory over us was not just in combat or computation, the king continued. It was in showing us a better way. We had become like our crystals, beautiful, perfect, and utterly static. Emma stood, her voice carrying through the chamber. And now, the king's form shifted, his crown crystals displaying entirely new patterns. Now we remember how to change. The Kraxan Empire will not be your enemy, humanity. We would be your students. Murmurs filled the chamber. This was not the outcome anyone had expected when the alien fleet first appeared in Earth's orbit. Students? Admiral Chen asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. Yes. The king's response was immediate. You have mastered something we had forgotten. The art of never stopping, never settling, never believing that any achievement is final. Marcus, who had been characteristically restless, suddenly stood, like learning new moves even when the old ones worked just fine. Exactly. The king's armor rippled with what Emma's systems now recognized as enthusiasm. Your combat style showed me that victory isn't about being unbeatable, it's about being unpredictable. Jake closed his laptop with a smile. And your computing systems, they're already starting to dream, aren't they? The king's response was to project a hologram of his fleet. The ships were visibly different now, their once rigid crystalline forms flowing with new possibilities. We are learning to ask questions again, not just calculate answers. Emma's augmented vision captured everything. The subtle changes in the king's structure, the evolution of his fleet, the hope in both human and alien eyes. So what do you propose? An alliance, Vraxthal declared, not between perfect beings and weak ones, as I once foolishly thought, but between two species who can learn from each other. Your adaptability, our technology. Your creativity, our resources. He turned to address the entire assembly. The galaxy knows the Kraxan Empire as conquerors. Let them now know use as scholars, as students, as beings who have remembered how to grow. The chamber erupted in discussion, But Emma's focus remained on the king. Her systems detected something remarkable. His entire crystalline structure was resonating with a new frequency, one that matched the natural harmony of growth and change. "You know," she said to him quietly, "most species would have responded to defeat with anger or revenge." The king's form shifted to match her height, a show of respect that would have been unthinkable days ago. Most species haven't had the gift of being proven so wonderfully wrong. As the sun set over the UN building, its light caught the king's new form, creating a rainbow of possibilities. The perfect empire had not been destroyed by its defeat. It had been reborn through it. To growth, Emma raised a glass in the traditional human gesture. To never-ending change, the king replied, his crystal form shimmering with new life. And in orbit above them, the Kraxan fleet continued to evolve, each ship a testament to the truth that had saved their empire. Perfection is not an end, but a journey, one best taken together.